August 1945, that the war in Europe is already over. Hitler is dead. Berlin is rubble. Yet on a blistering afternoon in Texas, far from bombed cities and mass graves, a group of German women stand trembling inside a wooden barracks surrounded by barbed wire. They are prisoners of war. A U.S. Army officer steps forward. His voice is calm, professional, almost gentle. "You will undress," he says. The words land like a sentence. For these women, some in their early 20s, some older, some nurses, some clerks, some wives of German officers, those words mean only one thing. They have crossed an ocean of fear, believing American captivity would be brutal, that humiliation would come first, that cruelty would follow. They brace themselves. Some begin to cry silently. Some stare at the floor. One woman grips a small silver cross hidden in her palm. They expect violence. What they do not expect is the truth. And when they finally understand why they were ordered to undress, many of them break down not from fear, but from shock. Because for the first time in years of war, someone is treating them not as enemies, not as propaganda, not as spoils of war, but as human beings. To understand why this moment mattered, why it still matters, we must go back to how the war began. Back to how ordinary women were pulled into history's most brutal machine, and back to how the idea of the enemy nearly erased their humanity on both sides of the ocean. World War II did not begin with explosions. It began with humiliation. After World War I, Germany was crushed, not just militarily, but psychologically. The Treaty of Versailles stripped territory, crippled the economy, and planted a deep, quiet rage inside an entire generation. Inflation devoured savings. Pride evaporated. Democracy looked weak. Into that vacuum stepped Adolf Hitler. He did not promise peace, he promised restoration. And he understood something terrifyingly well. People who are afraid will follow anyone who tells them who to blame. Jews, communists, foreign powers, traitors within. By the time Germany invaded Poland in 1939, war was no longer a choice, it was inevitable. And as armies marched, women followed in quieter ways. They became nurses, clerks, radio operators, factory workers, wives holding families together, while men vanished into uniforms. They did not all believe in Nazism. They did not all resist it either. Most were simply trying to survive inside a system that punished dissent and rewarded obedience. When the war spread across Europe, France, the Soviet Union, North Africa, Germany needed everybody it could use, including women. The early years of the war brought victories for Germany and devastation for everyone else. Blitzkrieg shattered borders. Cities burned. Millions fled. But victory hid rot. By 1942, the tide was turning. Stalingrad became a graveyard. North Africa collapsed. Allied bombers began erasing German cities night after night. Hamburg, Dresden, Cologne. Women ran through streets carrying children, clutching documents, watching the sky glow orange as everything familiar vanished. By 1944, Germany was bleeding, and when the Allies landed in Normandy, the end was no longer theoretical. It was coming, fast. As Germany collapsed, millions tried to escape. Some fled west, hoping to surrender to the Americans rather than the Soviets, whose reputation terrified civilians. Among them were German women attached to military units, Red Cross nurses, administrative staff, communications auxiliaries, wives caught near front lines. They were not frontline fighters. But war does not ask for permission. When Allied forces advanced, these women were swept up in mass surrenders. They became prisoners. And for many, the journey did not end in Europe. It ended across the Atlantic. Few people know this. During World War II, the United States held over 425,000 German prisoners of war, more than any other Allied nation. They were shipped to camps across the country. Texas alone held dozens of POW camps. Why Texas? Vast open land, warm climate, secure distance from coasts. Most POWs were men, but a small number of women, classified as military auxiliaries or civilian internees, were also transported under strict protocols. They arrived thin, exhausted, silent, and terrified, because everything they had been told about Americans was wrong, or so they feared. Nazi propaganda painted Americans as monsters, rapists, savages. The women whispered among themselves during the voyage. What will they do to us? Will we be punished? Will we ever go home? No one had answers. The Texas sun was merciless. Barbed wire stretched endlessly. Guard towers rose against a blue sky that felt cruelly calm. The camps were orderly, clean, military. That alone confused them. No screaming, and no beatings, and no random cruelty. Still, fear lingered. Then came the medical intake. Inside a barracks converted into a medical processing area, the women were lined up. An interpreter translated calmly. You will undress for the examination. Time slowed. This was the moment they had dreaded. Some women froze. Point one began to shake uncontrollably. Another whispered, bit under her breath. They expected guards to leer, to mock, to hurt them. Instead, the officer continued. Female American nurses entered the room. White uniforms, calm faces, professional hands. Curtains were drawn. The explanation followed. This was not punishment. It was a medical examination. They were checking for lice, malnutrition, tuberculosis, untreated wounds. They would be bathed, disinfected, given clean clothes. No man would be present. No abuse tolerated. Silence filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. One woman began to cry, not softly, but violently. Another followed, not from fear, from relief, from the unbearable realization that after years of propaganda, bombing, hunger, and terror, the enemy was not what they had been taught. Many of the women later wrote about this moment. They described it as more disorienting than violence would have been, because cruelty fit the story they had been told. Kindness did not. They were given soap, real soap, clean towels, medical care they had not received in years. One nurse reportedly apologized, in German, for the cold water. That single apology shattered something inside them. The war had taught them to expect brutality. Instead, they encountered professionalism, humanity. Life in the camps was not freedom. They were still prisoners. But compared to Europe, it felt unreal. Regular meals, medical care, no air raids, no screaming in the night. They worked in kitchens, laundries, administrative tasks. Some learned English words. Some listened to American music, drifting through the fences. They watched local Texans stare at them, not with hatred, but curiosity. The women struggled with guilt. Their families were starving back home. Their cities were ruins. And here they were, safe. The hardest battles were internal. Many women had lost brothers, husbands, fathers. Some still believed in Germany. Others felt betrayed by everything they had been told. At night, they lay awake asking impossible questions. Was any of it worth it? Had we been wrong? Who are we now? For some, captivity became the moment their worldview collapsed, not through punishment, but through exposure to truth. When Germany officially surrendered in May 1945, the camps did not empty overnight. Repatriation took months. Paperwork, transport, medical clearance. The women followed the news closely. Photographs of destroyed cities, stories of concentration camps. The full weight of the regime's crimes emerged. Many felt shame they could not articulate. They were not guilty of those crimes, but they had lived inside the system that enabled them. When the women finally returned to Germany, they did not return as heroes. They returned to ruins, to hunger, to silence. Some were distrusted for having survived. Others were simply exhausted. But they carried something rare. They had seen the enemy up close and discovered that humanity survives, even in war. That moment in Texas, the order to undress, could have become another trauma. Instead, it became a turning point. Not because the war was kind, but because even in war, choices matter. How you treat prisoners, how you treat women, how you treat those who were taught to hate you. These women were stunned not because they were spared pain, but because they were spared dehumanization. And that may be the most radical act of all. Today, when wars still rage, when propaganda still rewrites reality, when enemies are reduced to symbols, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not force, it is dignity. And sometimes the moment that breaks a war's hold on the human soul is the moment when cruelty was expected and humanity arrived instead.